I'm going to start again. Sorry about that, technical difficulty. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the third installment of Cision's weekly webinar series, Best Practices in Brand Communications in Times of Uncertainty. My name is Chelsea Mirkin, and I lead Cision Insights, which is Cision's media analysis, insights, and consulting practice. I want to start off by saying we hope that everyone is doing well and staying safe during this unprecedented time. In today's session, we will be focusing on the coronavirus global media trends, including insights from traditional and social channels. And we'll also be taking a look at communications learnings and best practices from China, who is several weeks ahead of us here in the Western world in terms of infection rate and recovery. Really quickly, before I introduce our panel, I want to remind folks that we encourage you to continue to contribute to our live tweeting around this event, this ongoing event, this series. The hashtag we are using is COVID-19comms, inviting you to please join us in that conversation. Our social media teams will be standing by. And as a reminder, we'll be live and on video through this recording from our home offices in Michigan, Florida, Massachusetts, and Germany. So please don't be surprised and bear with us if there are any guest appearances from one of our pets or children. And finally, we want to remind folks that there will be an option in the COVID-19 resources page on the website to subscribe to receive the weekly insights reports that we'll be presenting today. So I want to introduce our panelists. Today I'm joined by my friends and colleagues at Cision Insights, who will be guiding us through the material in three parts. To start, we'll be welcoming Mark Weiner, our Chief Insights Officer at Cision, who will be providing a high-level overview of our study and key findings. Mark is a member of the Arthur Page Society. He's also an advisor to the University of Florida Public Relations Advisory Council and a trustee for the Institute of Public Relations. We'll also be joined by Karinne Smolenyak, who is our sector lead for our healthcare and nonprofit practice. She's our lead analyst in the production of the media trend study, and she'll be reporting findings from that study. Karinne has experience working with clients across the healthcare space, including health systems, payers, and pharmaceutical companies. And then finally, Bernd, Hitzemann, our VP of Analysis for Cision Insights and also our global sector lead for our automotive practice, will be exploring some of the trends from China and taking you through what's next for you as communicators. I'd like to now turn it over to Mark, who will kick us off. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Chelsea, and thanks everybody for joining. Today we're going to be looking at two studies which rely on a content analysis of news and social media. Content analysis is a rigorous scientific method of determining quantitative and qualitative elements in the media. And among research methods, media analysis is unique in that it simultaneously reflects and shapes public opinion. As we review our findings, please keep the following in mind. We're tracking media trends. We're not commenting or predicting anything about the rate of infection. In our second case from Bernd Hitzemann, we share findings that are based on a comparison of infection rates and media coverage in China. We understand that traditional media in China is state-controlled, although we also explored social media results, which are not so tightly controlled. And also, infection rate data from China is under scrutiny for its veracity. As such, we ask you to consider this report and these findings as directional rather than statistically significant. Now, let's turn to what everybody really wants to know, and that is the answers to these questions. Is this the right time to be proactive? What themes are appropriate now? And what do I do first? In the reporting we share, we offer several recommendations. One is to plan for a pivot point. One client calls this a local Goldilocks time window, during which the environment is not too hot, not too cold, not too hard, not too soft. But there will be a window, and it may be coming sooner than we think. To prepare for that window, we recommend that you track both coronavirus cases as well as coronavirus media attention in ways that we'll share, and to monitor these closely in each of your markets to anticipate your Goldilocks window with the understanding that certain parts of the country are peaking while others are relatively low. And while waiting for these local windows, we recommend that you continue to pursue media strategies that play into COVID-19 related themes around helping others, such as workforce enablement, connecting with family and friends, and citizenship-related efforts to empower health workers and researchers. We also suggest that you anticipate and then act upon your Goldilocks time window, where your news can flourish as COVID-19 reactive attention lessens in the media and slower competitors are waiting for clearance. The opportunity will be for those who are best prepared when the window opens. And even in the Goldilocks time window, we recommend strongly being wary of pushback and avoid news announcements that could imply the diversion of resources away from protecting against the virus, such as store reopenings, product announcements, manufacturing resumption. So with that, I am happy to introduce my colleague, Karinne Smolenyak, who will present the results and findings of the first report.
Thank you, Mark. The slides I'll be discussing today analyze COVID-19 coverage in English and Chinese language traditional media news sources. The data you'll see is from January 1st through last Friday, March 27th. On this first slide, we're looking at the overall volume of coverage, shares of traditional media articles on social networks, the top shared articles from the past week, and the trend in coverage since January 1st. From the trend chart, you can see that since January, COVID-19 coverage has been on a general upward trend with several plateaus along the way. In early March, coverage reached new heights as the virus gained foothold in the US and Europe, and that high volume has been somewhat maintained. This suggests that the current level of coverage we're seeing is the new normal, and volumes could increase further, as we've seen happen in previous weeks. The past week's COVID-19 coverage was characterized by calls for increased US federal action, coverage of the historic $2 trillion economic stimulus bill, escalating death counts in Spain and the US, a complete lockdown in India, and concerns about the global supply of medical equipment. US governors, notably New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, used strong terms to implore the federal government to impose oversight over which states received much needed medical supplies first, and to leverage the Defense Production Act to scale up production. Facing pressure from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the US, the IOC announced Tuesday of last week that the 2020 Olympics would be postponed. Looking ahead, we're anticipating heightened calls for federal government and private sector action. On this next slide, we see how that high volume of COVID-19 coverage compares to other topics discussed in the media, such as the Democratic primaries, the Trump administration generally, and the stock market. We also see how COVID-19 coverage is geographically distributed. On the left-hand side, the outer circle represents the full time period, January 1st through March 27th. The inner circle represents last week's coverage. From this chart on the left-hand side, we see that COVID-19 coverage has occupied almost half of the media environment since it emerged in January, outpacing even mentions of President Trump. And COVID-19's share of conversation has increased in recent weeks. Last week, COVID-19 comprised 76% of coverage and substantially overshadowed other competing topics. Looking at geographic distribution, where reporting media outlets are based, we see the majority of coverage is now being generated by the US and the UK. In earlier stages of the outbreak, China was the leading coverage producer. Looking at COVID coverage more in depth, we can see which topics are generating the most volume. This slide displays topics within coverage by article volume and groups topics by type. We see that health and policy topics are leading the media agenda. While fatalities and testing remain the overall most discussed topics of conversation, coverage around lockdowns increased most significantly versus the previous week. That spike in coverage was due to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's announcement of a nationwide ban on going outside. The supply of medical equipment like ventilators and personal protective equipment also rose to the forefront of conversation over the past week as healthcare providers and governors called for increased supply of critical gear. We also saw hospitals in New York, New Orleans, Detroit, and Atlanta warn they had reached capacity. Some hospitals reported that they have begun moving patients to outlying facilities. One topic we're keeping an eye on is capacity in rural areas where there is already a shortage of healthcare providers. The final slide of this section shows which industries were most frequently mentioned within coverage last week. We see that government actors were mentioned most frequently, and that's a trend we've seen since the beginning of the outbreak. Earlier in the crisis, travel companies were drawing substantial coverage, but recently we've seen a shift away from the travel sector toward the health and pharma and retail sectors. In the last week, we saw high-profile coverage of tech companies taking action to combat the spread of the virus. Elon Musk pledged to reopen a New York plant and begin producing Medtronic ventilators as soon as humanly possible. Alibaba, Apple, and Facebook announced that they would be donating millions of masks. Cisco committed $225 million to help governments, quote, rapidly deploy COVID-19 related technology solutions, end quote. In the coming weeks, President Trump's use of the Defense Production Act will likely play a role in dictating coverage trends. And with that, I will hand things over to Bernd.
Thank you, Karinne. So let's look over to China, where we have a very, very special situation because China is 7 to 8 weeks in front of us. So what we are trying to do is we were trying to find media reaction patterns from China and that can be used potentially to forecast responses here in the Western markets, right? So the first key takeaway is China is 7 to 8 weeks ahead of us. So if we look at the China infection curve, and if we overlay the media impact curve over that line, we see that there's one turning point, a turning point where the media coverage will go back. So the media coverage about COVID-19 will relax and will go back and will open up a window of opportunity for other topics outside of COVID-19, right? That day, the turning point, is the day the number of new infections goes down. So the turning point is the day the number of new infections go down. Right? That is the key takeaway here. And then if we look at where we are now, right? Every market is different. Italy is different than Germany, than France, and Spain. And also the US is very different from Europe, how the virus is spreading. But all the experts agree on that the turning point, right, the day when the number of new infections goes down is not that far away. And that turning point is the turning point we have to bear in mind, because after that, they will open up a window of opportunities where topics outside of COVID-19 can be communicated and placed. So we've identified 4 different phases. Let's look at the 4 different phases and see how they characterize. So phase 1 is the detection phase, which is over in almost all markets all over the world, right? Phase 2 is the preparation and prevention phase. That is the phase that we are currently still in the Western world, in Europe and in the US, Canada, South America. We are still in phase 2. We are in preparation and prevention phase, right? And then, in this phase, in the preparation and prevention phase, in phase 2, media and readers are still in crisis mode, and the majority of topics are COVID-related. So COVID is really dominating the media agenda. Then we've got a phase after that, phase 3, which we call the containment, mitigation, and damage control phase. So what is so special about that phase? So in that phase, we see in China an increasing allowance for non-corona coverage. That's really interesting. So corona coverage is going down, and a lot of other coverage, especially entertaining, positive formats, came up and were consumed by the readers in China. And then on top of it, right, people will still be in quarantine with time for news consumption. We see that now in the Western world, that a lot of online media report record record click numbers, UPD numbers, so people consume more in that phase 3, right? So that is a perfect phase to try out new digital communication formats. And our recommendation is because we are now in phase 2, right, in preparation and prevention phase, to use that time to focus, to prepare for phase 3. Like, start to prepare content now in preparation for phase 3. And then after phase 3, we've got another phase that's coming, that's phase 4, that's the recovery and prepare phase. That's the phase China is now in at the moment. So they now enter phase 4, with most of the Chinese workforce now back in their jobs. For large companies, 98% of the workforce is now back in their jobs. For smaller companies, roughly 80% of the workforce is now back in their jobs. So there's kind of a back to normal recovery and prepare phase. People will have less time to consume news and content in that time. So that said, from the turning point until phase 4, we will have a roughly 6 weeks window of opportunity where you can try out new formats, can place your content. So regarding the different communication formats, right? Like now in phase 2, in the phase we are currently in, for corporate communications, right? We heavily recommend our clients to reduce classical corporate topics to a minimum. Don't communicate about yourself, about your company. The only thing that is working in phase 2 is really a corporate citizenship topics. Communicate how you can help to stop the spread of the virus, how you can help to contain the virus. What is your contribution to that crisis, right? Those topics need to be communicated in phase 2. But you can use the time now to create new digital communication formats and topics for phase 3. Because in phase 3, right, the topics will open up and you will have much more room to communicate your corporate topics. And same for phase 3, where restart and reboot communications will start. Interestingly, if you look at management communications, management positioning, CEO positioning, all phases work well for that type of communication. Because, I mean, the CEO, the top management, the executives, they are needed in phase 2. They are needed in the phase that we're currently in to guide the company through that storm, to guide the company through that difficult time. So management communications work really well. If you do something good, if your management helps to contain the virus, right, communicate it, we have a lot of positive examples from China that work really well. When we go over to product communications, now in phase 2, the phase that we're currently in, we heavily recommend our clients to reduce your product communications or your promotional communications, right? Your product launch communications, reduce it to a minimum. Don't communicate it now unless it's helping to fight. It's helping to fight the virus, right? And if you have something that is far away from fighting the virus, far away from COVID-19, right? Don't communicate it in this phase, right? No promotional activities, no communications for the sales funnel, right? You can prepare it right now, right? You can prepare content in this phase, right? But prepare it for the next phase, for phase 3. That phase will come in every market, and the phase will come when the number of new infections goes dramatically down. Then that phase will start, and then you can place your product communications, your launches, together with new digital formats, right? So that phase will come. Start prepare now. That's what we are telling our customers right now. And there are lots of topics that we saw from China that will be trending in that phase. So try to adjust to those new topics, like contactless as the mega trend in China right now. Try to prepare, try to learn from the phases in China and start to prepare now for that phase. Then another interesting finding for product communications in phase 4, the recovery and repair phase. For a lot of sectors, the product communications there's no back to normal. I mean, look at all the sectors that heavily rely on fairs and shows, like car shows, right, or tech shows. I mean, it's very unlikely that there will be any mass gathering in the next 3, 6, or even 12 months in the Western world. And also international travel will be heavily restricted in the next 3, 6 months. So, and no company will risk to have journalist group events. No company will risk to risk infection there, right? So product communications will be heavily affected in phase 4 and onwards, at least for the next 3, 6, 12 months for a lot of sectors. So let's look into some case studies from China. Here we brought some phase 2 case studies from China. I think the first case study is here from Chinese tech companies, Alibaba, Baidu, who reacted really impressively quick in creating apps and information formats to inform Chinese people about the spread of the virus, but also like are areas around me, how are the infection rates in that area, and they created also apps to prevent the spread of the virus. So they reacted really quickly in that crisis. And for everyone out there who's listening to this, if you have anything that can contribute to fight the virus, right, communicate it. This phase 2 is your phase. Whenever you have, right, spread the message if you're doing good. So those corporate citizenship topics, also like car manufacturers who change their production to this mask right now, corporate citizenship topics to fight the virus, they work really well in phase 2, but also like ongoing in phase 3 and ongoing. Then another learning here, we already talked about it, avoid promotional or product-focused communications in phase 2, right? We have a really positive example from Lincoln in China. They switched their product communications, their product-focused communications to service-oriented communications, like with simple topics. Is the car a clean place? Is the car a safe place? How do I clean the car? What are the areas that people touch most in the car, right? Which cars should I disinfect on a regular basis? Is it okay if I disinfect the leather steering? Does it damage the car? Topics like that, right? They really supported their customers or people in China very well during that phase. We have some examples from the Western world where companies try to start communicating, promoting their products with referencing COVID. It didn't work. It only created shitstorms, created negative coverage. So try to avoid any product promotional coverage in phase 2 and try to move into phase 3. Then, very interesting here that management communications work really well in phase 2. So what do we see here? We have here the top photo. We have a CEO of a Chinese fast food company tearing apart letters from his employees who offered him lower wages. So they offered him, hey, go down 30, 40, 50% with our wages, but please let us keep our job. And then he went in front of the camera, was tearing apart those letters, and were telling his workforce that salaries will be stable. And then, interestingly, the same CEO, right, they were starting like in phase 3. They were launching a 2020 strategy conference in phase 3. Right, in that phase 3, they were having a digital strategy conference, and interestingly, it was very humorous and very positive. And you can't imagine how that was, how people loved it in Chinese social media. It was heavily shared. People liked it, that positivity, and that's what people need in phase 3, right? A lot of people will be in quarantine like for 3, 4, 5 weeks. People want to see positive messages, positive news. So don't think because it's a difficult time, there's no room for positive news as well, right? So this is a great example how this can work. Then for phase 3 plus, we brought another 3 case studies. The new mega trend in China is contactless services. We don't see that much now in the Western world. I don't see that much in Europe. I don't see that much in the US, but it's a mega trend in China. Everything is becoming contactless. Every company is rethinking their processes, their business, and try to make it as contactless as possible. And it's a selling argument, right? People order at fast food companies where they have contactless deliveries, right? Where they can make sure that the food or the paper where the food is in is not contained. There's no chance that it can be contained. It's completely paper. It's completely contactless. So another good example are Chinese car manufacturers. They launched online sales dramatically in phase 3, and they offered some of them were trying out key deliveries with drones, completely contactless. And a very strong selling argument is also like that the cars come completely disinfected, virus-free. So we heavily recommend rethink your business processes, start to communicate about how you do contactless business with your clients and how you have to contain the virus. Another trend that came up in China is here robotics, right? Autonomous delivery, autonomous mobility is a highly trending topic in China. So all the smart ideas on public transport alternatives resonate well, but also autonomous disinfection machines, outdoor logistics, parcel delivery, or indoor goods delivery in big housing blocks. Those topics went really well in phase 3. So all the topics also, still closely related to COVID, but smart solutions, how you help prevent the virus. And then the very last case study and learning here is among all phases, phase 2, 3, and 4, right? It's the next theme, health first. Don't be the first to resume production. Don't be the first, don't risk anything with your workforce. Don't risk anyone. Health first. If you keep that in the back of your mind, I think that is a really important guide because we've seen heavy shitstorms and very negative reactions in China of companies who try to start production earlier than other companies, earlier than their competitors, but risking their workforce. So keep in mind, health first across all phases. And if you keep that in mind and communicate like with a good gut feeling, wait for the phase 3 to come, when the number of new infections goes down dramatically, then I think we're all in a good way. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Karinne and Bernd and Mark, for sharing your insights. And I'll mention that we within Cision Insights are continuing to track the media trends related to COVID very closely, as well as looking into what messages should be communicated and when those messages should be communicated. And we look forward to continuing the conversation with you all. Encourage you to leverage the COVID-19 comms hashtag to submit any follow-up questions that you have as you review the research and listen to the presentation today. And just want to thank our presenters again, and thank you all for joining us for part 3 of our webinar series, Best Practices for Brand Communications in Times of Uncertainty. Hope you all stay well and stay safe, and we look forward to speaking with you soon. Thank you.